Hey there, YouTube. Leo Alderpold, and I'm smoking in a country gentleman. Something I really rather like, but that I don't smoke very often, at least not in the house, and that's Mac Baron's HH Latakia Flake. Now, I'm sitting in a woodland at the moment. That's pretty much a typical example of what happens when you don't control squirrel and deer. And it's taken me a little while to get that camera set up where it is, so I'm not going to move it around. But you can probably see from behind me that the regeneration's pretty thick. And what you can't see probably is it's all been barked, either at the top or at the bottom. So at the top by the squirrels and at the bottom by the deer. And this is a fairly typical example of what happens really when squirrels and deer combine to absolutely hammer a woodland. But I'm not here to grumble about squirrel and deer. This is actually a VR to Smokey Dan, who asked us to just read a passage from our favourite fairy tale or book or something like that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to read you a passage from certainly, well, probably my favourite book. That's this one right here. You can see that, by a chap called Stephen Graham. A rare day of sunlight, and unfortunately I can't position my camera in a good place where it's not too bright, but hey. So I came across this book a couple of years ago because it was referred to in another book that I was reading, a book called The Wild Places by Robert Macfarlane. And the guy who wrote this book is first published in the 1930s, well before travelling the world on foot became fashionable. By the time that he'd published this book, he'd already walked around the world a couple of times. And he didn't take the easy route either. He didn't just go to the warm places. He walked right through Siberia and the Russian steppes. You know, he was quite an adventurer. And one of the things that I do when I'm reading a book, particularly a book like this, is I have a notebook with me that I like to copy out little passages that particularly speak to me. And I first started reading this book while I was looking after a friend of mine's cabin out in the woods, so I had a bit of time to myself. And I had to stop taking notes because I realised that I was pretty much rewriting the whole book. Oh, that's lovely. I'm just going to set the pipe down and read you a passage. I had a bit of a hard time trying to decide which passage to read for you, really, but I'm hoping this one will do the trick anyway. It's from a chapter called The Art of Idleness. The virtue to be envied in tramping is that of being able to live by the way. In that indeed does the gentle art of tramping consist. If you do not live by the way, there is nothing gentle about it. It is then a stunt, or something done to make a dull person ornamental. I listen with pained reluctance to those who claim to have walked 40 or 50 miles a day, but it is a pleasure to meet the man who has learnt the art of going slowly, the man who disdained not to linger in the happy morning hours, to listen, to watch, to exist. Life is like a road. You hurry, and the end of it is grave. There is no grand crescendo from hour to hour, day to day, year to year. Life's quality is in moments, not in distance run. Fallen trees are to be sat on, laddered trees to climb, flowers to be picked, nests to be looked into, songbirds to hear, falcons to be watched. The river invites you to strip. You sit under the cascade in the noontide. You climb into caves to cool and dry. The green roof of the mole's track is to be followed till you find the gentleman in velvet in his home. The sound of the tapping of the woodpecker shall guide you to the loose bark tree, where with watchful eye a bird of beauty is hunting the unmannerly woodlouse. You shall approach gently the deer who, in a group, wait for you with startled eyes. They run from the crashing and speedy. They can be won by the gentle. Wild nature is not so wild as we think, or we are wilder. It is not so far from us, and we are nearer. I could go on reading pretty much the whole book, I'm sure. But I hope that's given you a bit of a taste of a book that certainly speaks a lot to me, and it's a perennial whenever I go anywhere. It lives in my rucksack or in my bag or something. I always like to have it handy. It's almost like my Bible because I love the way he writes. But anyway, see if my pipe's still lit. That's my VR to Smokey Dan. Pick you up and show you around briefly. Look at that, sunshine! Sunshine! We've pretty much had none of that since November, I'm sure of it. And on that note, I'll bid you guys peace. Until the next time, stay smoky.